Okay, I want to welcome you all to our Bible class. And what we're going to be talking about is studying that we believe in God because. And you may ask, well, we believe in God, but why do we believe in God? We have our Bible and we know that God wrote the Bible and we know that we believe the things that are written in the Bible. But there are many, many things that let us know that there is a God, and that's the things we're going to be talking about. God was the creator of all things and the maker of all things, and these are some of the topics we'll be talking about in the next few weeks. The first thing we're going to do is look at this paper, and what we believe is we know that there is a creator and maker for everything that we see around us. For instance, a car. Who made a car? And we can't really say that God made the car, but we know that somebody had to make that car, and that would be a car maker. Who would make a watch? We don't just walk by one day and see a watch pop up out of the ground, but somebody had to make the watch. And so who would make a watch? Who would cause a watch to be made? And that would be a watchmaker. The clothes that we wear every day, they don't just appear from nowhere. Someone had to make them or cause them. And so who would make our clothes but a clothes maker or a dressmaker? And when we drink milk every day, where does our milk come from? Who causes our milk? And we know that milk comes from cows. And so we know that the maker of milk is a cow. But who made the cow? And we know that God made the cow. And then there's other things that we see every day. Our toys that we play with. This is Thomas the Train and a little troll. Who makes the toys? We didn't just walk by and see a toy pop out of the ground, but we know that the toy maker makes the toys. And like Hadley always tells me, Santa makes all the toys. But who makes the gum? Who gives us the good gum that we chew? A gum maker? The shoes that we wear on our feet? Those things all came from somebody, and that would be a shoemaker. And so we need to remember that everything, if you just look around the room right now and see something and say, who made that or who caused that? And that's the new word that we want to use. Everything has a cause. Everything that we have is caused by something else. And eventually that thing was caused by God. But what we're talking about today is, can we think about anything that was not made or had a maker? We're sitting outside. We know that the bricks came from a brick maker. This table came from a table maker. Everything that had a beginning has a cause. And we know, of course, that God caused us or made us. Everything has a cause. And so what we're going to talk about also, if we can see, this is a little bit of a paper, but God was the first and great cause. But some things we're going to be learning about in this study is that the bee caused the honey, the bird caused the bird nest and the eggs, and the beaver caused the beaver dam, and a spider causes webs. Who causes our house? A house builder, and that's a man. And we know that in the book of Hebrews, chapter 3 and verse 4, for every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. And so what we're going to talk about today, the first thing, is the bee. And the bee, who do you think was the maker of the bee? Of course, we know that God created all the insects and all the living beings. So God is the maker of a bee. But who is the maker of honey? And honey, it is delicious and we like to use it. But honey has a cause, and that cause is a bee. A bee makes the honey. And the bee, we're going to learn about all the jobs that the bee has. And the only way the bee would know what to do is because of the unique way that God created him. And the bee, one thing we're going to talk about is the house that the bee lives in. And this is the honeycomb. And the bee makes this. And the honeycomb is a home for the baby bees. And bees live in this honeycomb. And bees are very, very special. And this is what we're going to learn about, how special bees really are. So the bee flies around and flies around. And when he's flying around, he's doing a little dance because he's telling all the other bees that I have found a good place to get some pollen. And what the bees are looking for is the pollen that comes in the center of flowers. And if you've ever picked up a flower and maybe crushed it in your hand, you get a little bit of yellow stuff all over your hand. You can see that in the center of this pollen. And so that's what we're going to be talking about in a minute, is the pollen that the bee gets off of this flower. And deep, deep down inside, he sticks his special tongue in there and gets something called nectar. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So if you see the beehive and where he lives and where he puts his food, and these are made by the bee. Okay, when bees crawl inside this flower to get pollen, this very, very soft pollen clings to her legs. If you can see the legs on the bee, it's full of little bitty hairs all over its body. Its legs, its arms are full of these little hairs, and they're called little brushes. And she takes the pollen sticks to these. Everywhere the bee walks, the pollen sticks to it. And bees have over 3 million hairs all over their body. They even have hairs on their eyes that capture the pollen. And when she gets done with getting the pollen, she has to scrape all the pollen and put it in her little sacks. And one thing that when the bee is doing this, he's also helping other plants and vegetables grow, because when he's spreading this pollen and going from one flower to a different kind of flower, he's trading pollen, and that's called pollination. And that is part of God's way of making things in our world continue to grow. But if you see the bee, and he has a little tongue that's going to come out from here that we're going to talk about. But here is where he's storing some of that pollen. And as a bee is gathering, she's using she's sucking up nectar from the inside of the flowers through her tube. And it's really kind of like a tongue, and it sticks out, and it's like the bee has its own little built-in straw. And when the bee takes that into his mouth, it turns it into honey, the sweet nectar into honey. And she has a very special part in her body that she stores this honey. And it's called a honey sac. When she gets back to the beehive, she blows the honey out of her tube to feed the queen bee, the father bee, and the baby bees. And she also, if you remember the honeycomb, fills up those little honeycombs too with pollen and just a little dab of honey. There are people who keep bees, and they take the leftover honey that the bees don't use, and they sell it to other people. And so bees, we find, are very good to us. They help us grow fruit and vegetables, and they make, or should we say cause, honey to be eaten. So ask if you have some honey. Maybe you can ask your mom today after we finish this, and you can taste it. And also, today a lot of us use cough syrup that has honey. because it's soothing to our throat. But even though we should respect the bees and that they do good things, we know that a bee can also, if they get threatened, they could sting us. And they do have a little stinger. And if you've ever been stung by a bee, it can hurt you. But they're not doing it to be vicious. They're doing it because they're trying to protect themselves, because they're very small. Now we're going to look back at the honeycomb, and bees place the pollen inside these little holes into the crevice, and they spray it with a bit of nectar to make honey bread for them to eat. So who caused the honey? Did God cause the honey? No, we know the bee caused the honey. Who caused the house for the baby bees? The bees made the house. But who caused the bees? Did people make bees like a clockmaker or a toy maker? No, we know that only God could have created the bees. And of course, only God is strong and wise enough to make bees, because the bees are programmed to do all these things that they do without being taught it or without having knowledge, but knowing that God is the great cause of all things. So the new rule that we're trying to learn today is that everything has a cause. And if we can remember this Bible verse, Hebrews 3:4, for every house is built by someone, but he who built all things is God. And we must obey God and obey his teachings in the Bible. So this is the end of our lesson today, but there's a little video, if your parents can allow you to watch it, that's really a good video about making bees. And we have sent a craft by email that you can make your own flower, and you can make a honeybee and show how he takes his honey. And there's also some worksheets that you can do about what you learned during this lesson. And if you like this lesson, I want you to tell, most of y'all know me as BB, I want y'all to tell BB that you enjoyed it, if you wanted to do it again, or what you thought about learning about some of the things that God has made. And we hope you'll watch the next one. I should have prayed. I didn't think about that until... What do you think?
Awesome.